السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك المظلومين الغر الميامين. روحي وأرواح العالمين لكم الفداء. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة. غريب يا مظلوم كربلا. سيدي يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The martyrdom of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein on the plains of Karbala was such a meta-historical turning point that the aftershocks of this earthquake are felt to this very day. The repercussions, the reverberations of the legendary stand of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and his heroic companions and family members were so strong that they eviscerated tyrannical thrones and toppled dictatorial governments. It is such an important pivotal point in history. As I said, it's not even a historical turning point, it's meta-historical. It is an event that somehow bends the space-time continuum, and I don't mean this in metaphoric terms. When Muharram begins, you're not talking or commemorating a historical event. You're commemorating something that's about to happen in the future. You are, in fact, counting down to the tragedy of Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura. We confuse almost the past with the present with the future when it comes to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And so, many attempts have been made to suppress the commemoration of Ashura. Tyrant after tyrant have sensed the danger that the legend of Imam al-Hussein represents to their rule. And so they've tried. They've done their best efforts, exerted their best efforts to eliminate the name of Imam al-Hussein from our collective memories. And they still do, to this very day. I mentioned this the other night, where a news report came out from Malaysia, a country that prides itself as a place where different cultures live peacefully side by side, where different religions come together without a problem, without a hitch. And yet, when it comes to the remembrance of Imam al-Hussein, a tyrant has to expose their true intent. And suddenly, a small gathering in someone's house where 25 people had gathered around to commemorate the tragedy of Imam al-Hussein is treated like a security problem. 25 Shia have 25 security personnel, religious police, sent over to that house, a ratio of 1-to-1. That's how dangerous these grieving men, women, and children are in the eyes of tyrants. 25 officers are dispatched to that house. Every last single one of them is placed under arrest, including children. They were taken in for questioning, interrogation, because they cried for the Prophet's family. That's their crime. And of course, these tyrants have made their best efforts. But we know it won't work. Because it's like trying to blow out the sun with your mouth. It's like trying to stop a flood with a toothpick. Standing in the way of Imam al-Hussein is standing in the way of our internal yearning for justice. Standing in the way of Imam al-Hussein is like telling everyone to switch off their humanity. Standing in the way of the remembrance of Imam al-Hussein is the most futile effort anyone has ever attempted to do. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And so it's been an incredibly monumental event that has shaped and changed the course of human history forever, without a doubt. But there's a question that I'd like to discuss tonight. A question that some of us might ask, but perhaps more importantly, it's a question that we hear the adherents and followers of other Islamic schools present to us as a challenge. And the question is paraphrased in these terms. Essentially, why is it that Imam al-Hussein is the only member of the household of the Prophet, the household of purity and infallibility, who decided to rise up against the tyrant of his day? Why is it just Imam al-Hussein? I mean, surely there were other tyrants worthy of being toppled, of being challenged. Surely there were other oppressive regimes and dynasties that could have used the same fervor, the same passion as Imam al-Hussein and his companions displayed on the day of Ashura. Amir al-Mu'mineen, the commander of the faithful, he fought with the tyrants of his day, albeit on a limited scale. All of the wars that the Imam was engaged in were forced upon him. These weren't wars or conquests that he went out looking for. When he fought with Al-Qasitin, Wal-Mariqin, Wal-Nakithin, all of these different factions, different groups, it was a different dynamic. Then the time was for Imam al-Hasan, and of course Imam al-Hasan, al-Mushtaba, al-Zaki is known. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Quite unfortunately, is known in some circles only as the person who signed the truce with Muawiyah. Though of course Imam al-Hasan had incredibly heroic stances and positions that he took during the lifetime of his father Amir al-Mu'mineen and later after the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen. But that's how he's known for. That's what he's known for. And then you have the other members of the Ahlul Bayt. You have Imam Zayn al-Abidin, who had to live through the reigns of the most tyrannical, most satanic, most demonic tyrants of their day. We're talking about Marwan ibn al-Hakam. We're talking about Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. We're talking about Al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik. We're talking about people who would tear up the Quran for pleasure, for fun, who would kill people without question, without reservation. They would murder, they would maim. One of the sins of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan was Ubaidillah ibn Ziyad. It was these governors that they were appointed early on by Muawiyah and who remained in their position and who would murder at the drop of a hat without any qualms or reservations, right? I'll mention one instance. You have the governor sitting on the pulpit, delivering a sermon, essentially trying to deceive the masses and cursing the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, cursing the family of the Prophet, when one of the audience members, picks up a pebble and he pelts this guy. He throws the pebble in his direction. So because the audience was quite large, there was a large group of people, he couldn't determine exactly who was the perpetrator of this unspeakable crime of pelting the governor, of throwing a single pebble in his direction. So he said, look, I don't know who exactly did this, but I do know that it came from the general vicinity of this corner of the Masjid al-Kufa, which included 70 people. He said, I want the eyes of these 70 people gouged out so that they would act as an example for others so that this incident is never repeated. And so we had these kinds of tyrants. Imam al-Sadiq in his time, al-Mansur al-Dawaniqi. Prior to Mansur, it was Abu al-Abbas al-Saffah. Saffah in Arabic literally means the one who sheds blood. He was given that title by his cohorts, by his own people. So you could imagine what kind of a tyrant he was. And he was the founder of the Abbasid Caliphate. Then his brother came along, al-Mansur al-Dawaniqi. This man was given the title of Muawiyatu Bani al-Abbas. He was the Muawiyah of the Abbasids. A tyrant, a violent creature who killed with absolutely not a blink of an eye. And so the question is, if the intent of Imam al-Hussein was to bring down an oppressive tyrant, was to tear down a totalitarian regime, then why didn't the other members of the Ahlul Bayt do the same thing? Why is Imam al-Hussein singled out? And so to address that question, I will present three possible responses. The first is this, and this is something that scholars have discussed. Historians have deliberated on this possibility as perhaps being the most pertinent to this question. That the circumstances of Imam al-Hussein were unique. These were conditions that were not replicated before or after the day of Ashura. And they specifically cite the demeanor and conduct of Yazeed ibn Muawiyah, may God's eternal damnations be upon him. Yazeed was unique in that he did not even make the faintest attempt to hide his disbelief, his mockery of the religion of Islam, his hypocrisy, which was at the highest possible degree, or the lowest rather. Whereas if you look at his father, Muawiyah, was without a doubt one of the most vile creatures to have ever walked on this earth. He was without a doubt a disbeliever in anything that the Prophet and his family brought in the form of revelation. Not once in his entire life did he believe the Quran or the message of the Prophet. He was a zindiq, as we say in Arabic. But, and of course we have a lot of evidence to back up that claim. For instance, you have Sunni historians, people like Al-Qurtubi, who narrates the story. And he says, the story in a nutshell, you might have heard it before, but I'll tell you the story perhaps with some context. You have one of the aides and advisors and close confidants and cohorts of Muawiyah, a man by the name of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. May Allah curse this man. He was one of those who participated in the ambush and the raid on the house of Fatimah al-Zahra. He has a son. His son's name is Al-Mutrif ibn Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. I'm giving you the chain so that it's all authenticated. Al-Mutrif says, according to Al-Qurtubi, that my father used to spend a lot of time with Muawiyah. He would go and spend endless nights with him doing God knows what. But every time he'd come back home, he would praise Muawiyah's intelligence, his astute brain when it comes to politics and deal making and defeating his enemies and disarming and neutralizing his foes. And so as someone, as a politician if you like, always praised him. Until one night, Al-Mutrif says, my father came back home and he was saying Muawiyah is the filthiest person I've ever seen in my life. I said to my father, what's going on? What happened? He said, well, tonight I went to him and I said, look, Muawiyah, you're an old man. You probably don't have a lot of time left. You're going to die at some point. So how about you orchestrate a political maneuver by bringing the family of Bani Hashim, the family of the Prophet, maybe try and win them over. Maybe try and lessen the antagonism and the resentment that you exhibit towards them by helping them out, decreasing the pressures that you've placed on them. Stop hunting down their friends and their companions. Stop killing the companions of the family of the Prophet. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to die, then you want to leave some kind of a legacy. You want to be remembered for being a just king. Of course, Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah isn't trying to advise Muawiyah to be a good, moral, God-fearing person. He's just saying that from a PR perspective, you might want to polish your image a little bit. And so he says, Muawiyah turned around and he said to me, so what? So what if I get remembered? Because remember, this person doesn't even believe in God or the afterlife or heaven or hell. So what difference does it make? He's like, I don't care about my legacy. There's only one thing I care about. He said, what's that? He said, my mission in life is to ensure, and then he used a vulgar profanity to refer to the holy messenger of God, which I will mention in Arabic but won't translate. He said, Wallah inna ibn abi kabshah, in reference to the Prophet. He said, this man is being remembered 5 times a day. And then he mentioned where the Prophet's remembered. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa Allahumma salli. Brothers, they're asking if you could move a little forward so that there would be more space for those coming in. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Mawla, the Master, the Savior, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So Muawiyah says to his friend Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, I don't care about my legacy or how I'll be remembered. What I care about is ensuring that this name is no longer mentioned from every minaret and every pulpit. I want to erase that name. And then he said, La wallah illa dafnan dafna. I will bury the name of Muhammad. I will bury this religion and all of its people and all of its key individuals so that they would never be remembered again. In other words, those who think that Muawiyah was in it so that he could rule, so that he could enjoy having authority over the masses so that he could have a bigger palace or a larger harem or this, that, or the other. They underestimate Muawiyah's viciousness. They underestimate the true nature of this man. He was there with a vengeance. He was trying to obliterate the name and legacy of the Prophet of Islam and restore the Arabs and the world to its pre-Islamic pagan era where people would be prostrating before statues that they made with their bare hands. It wasn't about ruling and wealth and money and women. It was about something much more idealistic, ideological in nature. And so Muawiyah was this kind of person. But again, there's a difference between Muawiyah and his son Yazeed. In that even Muawiyah would confide to his friends that I have no belief. But then he would go out and lead prayers when it was time for salat. At least he made an effort to present a false impression of him having some trace of belief in God, right? He did try. And that makes him a bigger hypocrite, yes. But at least he's making the impression that I follow the tradition of the Prophet. They say that one day Muawiyah was sitting down, and again, this is narrated by Al-Turqubi. He says that he was drinking in a gold cup, which of course is haram in Islam. You're not allowed to use gold and silver utensils. And so one of the companions of the Prophet saw him, and he's like, Subhanallah, I heard the Prophet say that whoever drinks in a cold cup is cursed by Allah. So then Muawiyah responded by saying, وَلَكِنِّي لَا أَرَى فِيهِ بَأْسًا. However, in my opinion, I don't think there's anything wrong with drinking in a gold cup. Which is interesting, because when I read this, I'm like, boy, do we have a lot of people who say, in my opinion this, in my opinion that. Right? This tradition was started by, guess who? Muawiyah. In my opinion, this verse doesn't mean what everybody says it means. In my opinion, this is not haram. In my opinion, that. But what's more interesting is that instead of publicly attacking the Prophet, he simply presented an alternative truth. He presented a different opinion. It's like a different perspective, right? The Prophet says this, sure. Calm down. I think this. In other words, it's just as vile, it's just as hypocritical, and it's just as deceptive, but he's trying to keep up, the image of someone who believes in the Prophet. But then when Yazeed came, Yazeed would sit on the pulpit of Rasulullah while the severed head of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein was sitting in a bowl right in front of him. وَيَحْتَسِ الْخَمْرِ. He would sip on beer and then spill the rest right next to that bowl. Not inside the bowl, because as tragic as the events of Karbala were, and as heart-rending the catastrophe of Ashura was, there were some limits. The sanctity of the head of Imam al-Hussein was kept. So he'd spill the rest of the beer right next to it. That's Yazeed. And so Imam al-Hussein makes it very clear that the reason I choose to rise is that Yazeed شارب الخمور راكب الفجور قاتل النفس المحترمة ومثلي لا يبايع مثله. Yazeed is a drunkard. Yazeed is one who defiles every sanctity in the book. Yazeed is one who murders people randomly. And someone who is like me shall never submit or give his allegiance to someone who is like him. In other words, Imam al-Hussein is setting the standard. The bar is that high. That's why the Shia almost never fall for the deceptions of tyrannical rulers. Because the bar is set so high by the rule of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Imam al-Hassan and al-Hussein and the members of the Ahlul Bayt. The bar is too high for us to fall for these tyrants, unlike other people who'd be willing to pledge their allegiance to a mannequin, brothers and sisters. I don't know if you saw this a few years ago when the king of Saudi Arabia died. The next one came over and they had set up mannequins in shopping malls so that people would go and put their hand. There was like a hole in like a picture, and there'd be a hole and someone would stick their hand out, and you have people lining up to shake that mannequin's hand and say, أُبَايِعُكَ أَن تَكُونَ سَيِّدِي وَمَوْلَاي. I pledge my allegiance to you as my master. We'd never fall for that because we have Imam al-Hussein. We have Ali ibn Abi Talib. We have the Ahlul Bayt. And so the circumstances of Imam al-Hussein were very different from others. Bani al-Abbas, when they came and they ruled, they at least pretended they were trying to avenge the oppression that was leveled against the family of the Prophet. That was their motto. إِلَى الرِّضَى مِنْ آلِ مُحَمَّدٍ صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم صل على محمد. And so once again, the circumstances were so extreme, they merited and they required extreme measures in response. And not just the murder of Imam al-Hussein, but also every single member of his family. 28 shining stars from the family of Bani Hashim would have to be murdered. And the women and the children would have to be taken as captives and paraded around the nation in a humiliating display and an expression of victor's justice. All of this had to happen. The events of Ashura, brothers and sisters, were so carefully calibrated to achieve optimum results, to achieve the pleasure of Allah, and to give the ummah a wake-up call that would be sufficient until the day of judgment. And we'll talk about this a little bit as well, inshallah. But that's reason number one. Reason number two is that the circumstances had created a set of events that would ultimately lead to the rise of just the right caliber of companions that Imam al-Hussein needed to carry out his mission. These companions didn't exist in the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You all know that when Amir al-Mu'mineen called out for help, when Amir al-Mu'mineen needed the assistance of the people, Fatima al-Zahra would ride on the back of a mule and go around the city of Medina, knocking doors one after the other, pleading for help, pleading for assistance, saying that my husband has been oppressed, my right has been usurped, 40 nights in a row. And then after all of that, Amir al-Mu'mineen said, if anyone is willing to come and help, if anyone wants to come and support this religion from being deviated in the way that it was, then come back to me tomorrow with your heads shaved. How many people show up? 4. 4 people. Unbelievable. These were the same people who just 2 months prior to that witnessed the Holy Prophet holding the hand of Ali ibn Abi Talib, حَتَّى بَانَ بَيَاضُ إِبْطِهِمَا, to the point where they could see the whiteness of the armpits of Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen. Everybody saw Ali ibn Abi Talib be appointed as the Prophet's successor and heir. And yet, only 4 people showed up. Imam al-Hasan, famously abandoned by his own companions, his own friends. I mean, just think about the fact that Imam Ali's first cousin, Abbas, the Prophet's uncle, had 2 sons. Sometimes you hear Ibn Abbas said this, Ibn Abbas said that. That's usually a reference to the first son, Abdullah ibn al-Abbas, who's given the title of Habr al-Ummah, right? Someone who's knowledgeable, wise person, was a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen and a companion of Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein and their cousin, Abdullah ibn Abbas. But then he had a brother called Ubaydullah ibn al-Abbas. Ubaydullah ibn al-Abbas was one of the commanders of the army of Amir al-Mu'mineen. One of the commanders, one of the top-ranking military officers. Busr ibn Artat, try and remember that name, was one of the top mercenaries of Muawiyah. Muawiyah would send him for his special ops, if you like. His job was usually to kill, torture, maim as many people as possible. Scorched earth policy. He would go into a village and burn the whole village down. Busr ibn Artat goes to Basra. Ubaydullah ibn al-Abbas was not at his residence. He wasn't at home. Busr entered in front of the wife of Ubaydullah ibn al-Abbas, he killed 4 of his children. So he was a victim of Muawiyah, right? And yet, Muawiyah sent after him with a bag full of money, 100,000 gold coins. He bought him. He bought him. He's the cousin of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He's lost 4 children to the viciousness of Muawiyah. And he ended up switching sides over to Muawiyah's and taking all of his army with him. That's the caliber of companions that the Ahlul Bayt had to deal with. Imam al-Hasan's companions would send a message to Muawiyah saying that, how would you like Imam al-Hasan delivered? Would you like him dead or alive? And these were part of the inner echelon of Imam Hasan's, Imam Hasan's authority and rule. Imam al-Hasan also had to deal with people who were well-intentioned, good companions of his father, whose names I won't mention, because as I said, they were well-intentioned. But they would turn around and say to Imam al-Hasan, Ya mudhill al-mu'mineen, you're the one who humiliated the believers. Partly because, and this is why I say they were well-intentioned, obviously saying something like this to an infallible, inerrant Imam al-Hasan no less, would automatically render you a disbeliever. But the reason I say they were well-intentioned is because they wanted to avenge the murder of Amir al-Mu'mineen from Muawiyah. They had such hatred towards Muawiyah that they couldn't fathom the idea that Imam al-Hasan would ever enter into a truce with this man. And so Imam al-Hasan would say to him, he would say, would you please alight and disembark from your horse? And he would disembark. And then the Imam would say, could you please sit next to me? He would sit down. The Imam would say, have you heard the Prophet say, you're a companion of Rasulullah? Have you ever heard the hadith, Al-Hasan wal-Husayn imaman qama aw qa'ada? Hasan and Hussein are 2 imams, whether they rise or choose not to. And he would say yes. So the Imam would then remind him, well, I am choosing not to rise. And he would try to sort of calm them down and win them over again. But that was the caliber of companions that Imam al-Hasan had. You've probably heard this story before, but it's really critical that we talk about it. Sudayr al-Sayrafi was a companion of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He once came to the Imam and he said to him, Wallah la yasa'uka al-julus. By God, you're not permitted to sit back. You have to rise up. The Imam said to him, why? He said, Wallah, law kana li abik مثل ما لك من الأصحاب والأنصار لما طمع فيه تيم. By God, if your father had the numbers that you have, then your father as an Amir al-Mu'mineen, if he had the support that you have today, no one would dare challenge the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib. The Imam said, oh really? How many people do I have? He said, 100,000. The Imam said, 100,000? He said, 200,000. What am I talking about, 100,000? The Imam said, 200,000 supporters? He said, Bal nisfu dunya. Half the world supports you. Half the world is with you. And they're at your beck and call. They're just waiting for your move. The Imam said to him, Ya Sudayr, would you go out with me? Let's go for a walk. So they go out, and they're walking when they come across a shepherd who had a flock of goats that he was shepherding. So the Imam said to him, Ya Sudayr, Wallah, if I had this many supporters, as many as the flock of goats that you see here, ma wasa'ani al-qu'ud, I would definitely rise up. So Sudayr looked at the flock of goats. He said, you know what, let me count these goats. He says there were 17 of them. In other words, Imam al-Sadiq says that if I had 17 true, loyal supporters, I wouldn't be sitting down. I would be restoring justice. I would be restoring this nation back to where it was supposed to be. 17. So brothers and sisters, When you look at the world today, how many people are there who say, Ya laytana kunna ma'akum fanafuza fawzan azima? How many people do you hear who recite Dua al-Faraj? How many people do we have who participate in the aza of Imam al-Hussein? May Allah bless all of them. I'm not trying to judge anyone. If anything, we need to judge ourselves and our own intentions. When we say those things, when we say to the Imam of our time that we are at your beck and call, that we are here waiting for your reappearance, why does he not reappear? Why, in spite of all of these tragedies and afflictions and carnage and death and war and destruction, the Imam is still not choosing to reappear? Then think about this. Imam al-Sadiq said, all I need is 17. 17. Because you and I, we get tested. And again, I'm just talking about myself here. I get tested as a child. Then I grow a little older. And I'm tested with a new set of tools, a new set of trials. Then I develop desires and temptations, and I'm tested there. Then I get married, and I'm tested with my own family. And I'm tested with my parents. And I'm tested with the community. And I'm tested with showing support to good, worthy causes. And I'm tested with all kinds of things. And when I look at my life, all I see is miserable failure after miserable failure. Are we really ready for the Imam to reappear? Are we ready to join him at a moment's instance? Right? The Imam says in his famous letter to Shaykh al-Mufid, إِلَى الشيخ المفيد فليعمل كل واحد منكم بما يقربه من محبتنا وليتجنب ما يبعده منا. Each one of you should strive to take steps that you know will bring you closer to us, and avoid the things that will drive you away from us. فَإِنَّ أَمْرَنَا بَغْتَةٌ. Because when the time comes, there is no warning. When the time comes, you either have it in you or you don't. When the time comes, you need to be holistically ready. It's not just about what we say. It's not just about attending the majalis once or twice a year. You need to be truly ready for the Imam. Sometimes we do things that are so regrettable, they're irreparable. You can't fix them, right? The hadith says, Wallah latugharbalun. By God, you will be sifted, right? You will be tested, you will be tried. And then the Imam says, لَتُغَرْبَلُونَ ثُمَّ لَتُكَسَّرُونَ. You will be broken. You will be tested in such a way that the Imam then says that when glass breaks, right, you can put it back together. You can melt it and you can mold it back into what it was before. When glass breaks, you can do that. But there are certain things that you can't bring back to what it was before. Right? And the Imam mentions the example of a clay pot. He says when a clay pot breaks, you can't put it back together. It's done, it's gone. There are certain things that we do, brothers and sisters, that we can't fix. We can't fix. Someone was telling me just the other day when I was in Virginia. He's like, Sayyid, once I did something to my mother. It was an argument. As many young people today get into arguments with their parents because for some reason they like to think that their parents are like their friends. They can fight and make up. They can fight and make up. Not thinking of the fact that your parents have the greatest right upon you. Your parents should be treated like kings and emperors. As Imam As-Sajjad famously says in his dua, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. How do you treat an emperor? If you stood in the presence of a king, how do you treat them? With the utmost respect. And yet, oh, it's my mom, we're close, we have that relationship. We can fight every once in a while. No, you can't. So you're saying that I got into this argument, then I physically, albeit very slightly, I pushed her, just a little push. He goes, for 6 months I couldn't sleep. 6 months. And then soon after that, she died. Now, how do you fix something like that? How do you go back and turn the clock around? What do? You're done. That's a clay pot that's been shredded into small pieces. You can never put it back together. So the Imam says, you will be tried, you will be tested. Try not to break. Try not to lose the trial, the test, right? Do your best to get as close to the Imam as possible. I've said this before. I've said even when it comes to the choice, the personal choices that we make in our lives, like our career, where we live, who we get married to, all these things that occupy a large space in everybody's mind. Try every time you make a choice like that to somehow bring it into alignment with the pleasure of Imam al-Zaman. Because when the time comes and the Imam requires us to make a sacrifice, then you don't have to make too much of a sacrifice because everything you've done so far is in alignment with the pleasure of the Imam, with the acceptance of the Imam. Because we will be faced with those tough decisions. And that's the problem, brothers and sisters. Let me tell you something. The problem most of us have is the same problem that Hur had. Hur was a man who wanted to somehow reconcile between this world and the next. And that's a desire we all have. That's why you'll see people flocking towards and gravitating towards individuals who try to present religion as being completely compatible with the things that we enjoy and do in our lives. Right? Every once in a while, everything's halal, everything's okay, you can do whatever you want. The reason we gravitate towards those kinds of people is because deep down we want to be religious. Deep down we want to, be part of this community of believers and Muslims and Shia and so forth. But we, at the same time, have this inherent desire to also follow our whims and our wishes. And so, if we can somehow reconcile between these two, that's the perfect balance. But the problem is, Allah will test us. And He will bring those two conflicting interests right in front of each other. And you will be standing at a fork, and you will have to make the right choice. Because if you make the wrong choice, you will not be able to say labbaik when Imam al-Zaman reappears. You will not be able to follow his lead. Look at Hur again. By the way, there are people who kind of try to present Hur as, try and disrespect him or something like that. No one could be compared against the companions of Imam al-Hussein. But it's important for us to talk about these things because ultimately we want to know what their weaknesses were, what their strengths were. How can we follow their lead? Hur meets Imam al-Hussein, and then Imam al-Hussein says to him, it's time for prayers. How about you lead your people in prayers, and I lead mine. I become the Imam of Jama'ah, you become Imam of your Jama'ah. He said to the Imam, no. نُصَلِّي بِصَلَاةِ ibn binti Rasulillah. We'll all follow the lead of the grandson of the Prophet. So we'll all pray behind you. Great. The problem is, you are literally there to intercept Imam al-Hussein's path and obstruct his movement towards Kufa. At the same time you say, I want to pray behind you. Trying to reconcile between the dunya and the akhirah. Trying to say, okay, I'll pray behind Imam al-Hussein, but I have my orders and I'll do whatever it takes to stop Imam al-Hussein from proceeding forward. And that, brothers and sisters, is a choice we will face many, many times in our lives. Where you can't reconcile between these two. Ad-dunya wal-akhirah darratan, the hadith says. This world and the next is like two co-wives. They'll never live in peace and harmony. If someone had two wives, there'll always be tension between them, always problems between them. There is this constant tension between this dunya and the akhirah. We have to make a choice. Eventually, of course, Hur did make a choice, which is a great segue to the other point I wanted to mention, which is that if you look at the companions of the Ahlul Bayt, the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the companions of Imam al-Hasan, they struggled. And they struggled to get the right number and the right caliber of companions who could help them achieve their goal. But when it came to Imam al-Hussein, he had people like Abis. Abis was a companion who's probably not talked about too much. He came out of Kufa in order to join Imam al-Hussein with one of his friends and someone who was a servant of his father, right? His name was Shawdab. He came out with Shawdab and he said to him, what are we going to do? He said, what are we going to do? We're going to defend Imam al-Hussein until our last drop of blood is what we're going to do. He said, good, I just wanted to make sure. Because these are two very close friends. They've grown up together. They wanted to ensure that they were on the same page, the same wavelength. Eventually, Abis says to his friend, he says, Imam al-Hussein is sacrificing so much. This is on the day of Ashura. Imam al-Hussein is sacrificing everything he has. And I wish to sacrifice everything I have, including my best friend. I wish for you to go and fight so that I could see you get killed. And that pain that I will feel in my heart, أحتسبه عند الله. I will ask God to reward me for that. Remember, Imam Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas did the same thing with his brothers as well. He said, go and fight before me. لِأَحْتَسِبَكُمْ عَنَّ اللَّهِ. Why? Just think about this for a moment. To put this into context, let me share a beautiful hadith with you. The hadith is in the book of Ihtijaj by At-Tabarsi. Incredible book for those of you who want to get started on the books of hadith. It's essentially a polemical debate between the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet, as well as the Imams, with other schools of thought, other religions, other faiths, and so forth. In that book, it narrates that when Prophet Zakaria was told and God revealed to him the saga of Imam al-Hussein and told him that the last prophet and messenger will be the holy messenger of God, then he told him about his family, his daughter Fatima al-Zahra, and her children. God then also revealed to Zakaria that Hussein, the son of Fatima, the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen, will be massacred in broad daylight. And Rasulullah will grieve for him. The family of the Prophet will mourn him. The hadith says that Zakaria could not speak to anyone for 3 straight days, having heard this. He went to his home, he wouldn't greet anyone, he couldn't even eat anything for 3 days. Then he said, "Oh Allah, I wish to empathize with your last prophet." How do you empathize with him? He said, "Oh Allah, I'm an old man, my wife is barren, we can't have children, but I pray that you give me a child. And I want for that child, listen, to grow. And then I want, أُرِيدُ أَنْ أُفْجَعَ بِوَلَدِي هَذَا. I wish to grieve over that son just as Rasulullah will grieve over his grandson Hussein." So Allah granted him Yahya ibn Zakaria. Every time I would visit the shrine of Yahya ibn Zakaria in Masjid-e-Ali, those of you who have been there have visited that shrine. Every time I'd go there, I would say, "Assalamu alayka ya Shabih al-Hussein." May God's blessings be upon you, O one who resembled Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. He was born so that his father would grieve for him. Allahu Akbar. This, brothers and sisters, is next level sympathy. This is the empathy. This is you felt the pain, I want to feel the pain. Because you felt it. And so, Abis then comes to Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura. He says to him, "Ya Abu Abdullah, God knows there is no one dearer to me on the face of the planet than you. Ya Abu Abdullah, God also knows that if I had anything other than my soul to hand over to you, to be killed for your sake, by God I would do so. But all I got is one life. I wish I had more, but that's all I have. Ya Abu Abdullah, give me permission to go and fight in your way." What kind of companions were these? What kind of stars were these? Honestly, if Imam al-Hussein wasn't there, and you could individually examine the lives of each one of these companions, each one would be enough to guide the entire human race to the path of Ahlul Bayt. Each one of them. So he came to the Imam after his friend Shawdab had been killed. He asked the Imam for permission. The Imam granted him permission. Every historian who talks about this said that when Abis came into the battlefield, the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, and Umar ibn Sa'd himself said, "Hada rajulun musta'sid." This man looks like a roaring lion. He's not a human being anymore. Run from him because he will kill you. An army of 30,000 standing against one man. And they'd run away from him. At some point, he noticed that they were turning their attention to Imam al-Hussein. And of course, he would do anything he's able to defend Imam al-Hussein. So that's the point where he took his armor off. He took his shield off. He threw his helmet away. And then he tore his shirt off. and started walking bare-chested towards the enemy, saying, "Leave him, come and get me." And even then they would run away from him. Even then they said, "This man is a lion, he's not a human being." They ran and ran. He would chase after them, but they wouldn't approach. Eventually Umar ibn Sa'd said, "You can't kill this person. The only way you can do it is by pelting him with stones." Stoned him to death. Abis. John, Imam al-Hussein, comes to John. You know what his job was, by the way? John's task on the day of Ashura was to sharpen the swords and fix the shields. The Imam comes to him. He says, "Ya John, you came so that you could live your life with us. You came to my house so that you would be happy and so forth. But today, this is going to be a tough test. This is going to be difficult." See, Imam al-Hussein is trying to eliminate all the doubtful ones. He's trying to clear out the ones who were not sincere. And so that's why he kept encouraging everyone to leave. "Leave me, go." Until the end, when Imam al-Hussein is asked by his sister Zainab, "Have you tested your companions?" Imam al-Hussein said, "Yes, I have. إني لا أعلم أصحابا أبر ولا أوفى من أصحابي." I do not know, I have no knowledge of companions more loyal than my own companions. Imam al-Hussein's knowledge is the knowledge of God. So I don't have knowledge of anyone like them means they don't exist. The Imam said to John, "Why don't you leave us and just live your life? You're an old man." John said, "Ya Aba Abdullah, I know I am not worthy. I know that because I have a foul stench. My skin doesn't even resemble yours. My complexion is different from yours. And in Arab culture, that was seen as a negative." And then he said to the Imam, "My lineage is one that I'm not too proud of. إِنَّ نَسَبِي لَلَئِيمٌ إِنَّ رِيحِي لَنَتٍ." He then said to the Imam, وَلَكِنْ تَنَفَّسْ عَلَيَّ بِالْجَنَّةِ. I ask that you breathe onto me the aroma of paradise. Breathe, so that I could have the honor of joining you on this day. And then he said to the Imam, "Wallah, by God, I shall not abandon you until my blood mixes with yours." Subhanallah. They say, remember when Imam al-Hussein then came and he placed his cheek against the cheek of that slave. He did that only twice on the day of Ashura. Once to Aslam, the second time was with his own son, the beloved sweetheart of Aba Abdullah Ali al-Akbar. He opened his eyes. He said, "Man mithli wabnu binti Rasulillah, wadi'un khaddahu ala khaddi." Who am I? Who's like me? And the son of the messenger of God has his cheek against my cheek. They say that after he was killed, anyone who would walk past the location where he was killed, they would smell the most beautiful aroma. And that is the dua of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. These were the companions of Hussein. And that's the second reason why Imam al-Hussein rose against the tyrant Yazeed, but other members of the Ahlul Bayt did not, because they lacked these kinds of heroes and lions and brave companions that Imam al-Hussein had. The final point I will very quickly skip through. And that is that the test that the Ummah faced on the day of Ashura was a grave test. This was an incident that could not easily be replicated. This was something that the Ummah of Islam failed at miserably. Which is why when they killed Imam al-Hussein, they heard a caller from the heavens perhaps saying, "Wallah lan tattahidu ala fitrin wala adha." By God, you will never unite again after doing what you have just done. You will never unite around the Eid of Fitr and Adha again, which is what we see today. You see beautiful images of people going to Mecca, performing Hajj, and you talk about the unity of Muslims and you talk about the uniformity of these pilgrims, but as soon as they get back to their homes, they start killing each other again. You see the carnage that we have in the Muslim world today, the tyrants that rule over the Muslim world today, all the problems that we have. And this is because the Ummah failed that test. And so to have that test repeated was too much. It couldn't have happened. One hadith says, ارتد الناس بعد مقتل الحسين إلا ثلاثة. After the murder of Imam al-Hussein, everyone became a murtad. Everyone became an apostate, except 3 people, Abu Khalid al-Kabuli and 2 of his friends. These were the only ones. Of course, after that, the hadith says, فَكَثُرَ النَّاسِ. After that, many more people joined the cause of Imam al-Hussein. Hamid ibn Muslim, who was the journalist in Karbala recording the events, he was the one who went to Umar ibn Sa'ad and said to him, do you wish to kill these women and children? If not, maybe you should give them some water before they all die of dehydration. Hamid ibn Muslim was there in Karbala. Though of course he was just, in his words, a neutral observer. He didn't care who was right and who was wrong. He was just there as a journalist, trying to cover the event, if you like. Which of course is no excuse for him to just stand on the sidelines and not contribute. Hearing Imam al-Hussein call over and over again, أَلَا هَلْ مِن نَاصِرٍ يَنْصُرُنَا, and not doing anything to help him. But Hamid ibn Muslim was one of the Tawabin. Hamid ibn Muslim eventually went and joined Abu Salt al-Harawi, who led the people of Kufa in their revolt against Yazeed ibn Muawiyah. So in the immediate aftermath of the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein, everyone abandoned religion altogether. It took a while for the ummah to wake up. It took a while for the nation to realize the gravity of the crime that had been committed on their watch. And so this test is not going to be repeated. Instead, the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt used Imam al-Hussein as their own standard. People sometimes tell us, well, why is it that you cry for Imam al-Hussein more so than other members of the Ahlul Bayt? And our response to that is, because the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt wanted that to happen. Because Imam al-Rida said to Rayyan ibn Shabib, Ya ibn Shabib, in kunta bakiyan li shay' fabki li jaddi al-Hussein. O son of Shabib, if you're going to cry about anything, then cry for my grandfather, Aba Abdullah. Why? Ya Ali ibn Musa al-Rida. He said, لأنه ذبح عطشانا لأنه ذبح كما يذبح الكبش بأبي أنت وأمي يا أبا عبد الله. Because they slaughtered him like a sheep. The Imams of the Ahlul Bayt would always invite people to learn about the tragedy of Imam al-Hussein and cry for him. The Imams of the Ahlul Bayt themselves would sit around and call for gatherings and bring the men and the women, put up a partition, and then invite poets who could recite the saga of Imam al-Hussein, and everyone would cry. Islam provided a prototype of what it means to be a true Muslim. You've seen how a factory sometimes creates a prototype, and then the prototype is shown to everyone as what we're capable of doing. This is the best example of what we can do. The prototype presented by Allah as the true ultimate Muslim, the one who embodies all the attributes of every prophet and apostle of Allah. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. You are the heir. اللهم صل على محمد. The successor of every prophet, the embodiment of every virtue. Now, my apologies. I took so much of your time. May Allah bless you all. Having participated in the mourning of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein since the beginning of Muharram, anyone who volunteered to help bring the majlis together, anyone who attended and made the slightest effort to mourn the tragedy of Abu Abdullah, anyone who cried for the Imam, anyone who sympathized with the Imam, may Allah bless you all. May Allah keep us on the path of Abu Abdullah. May Allah never take away from us the blessing of knowing Imam al-Hussein and following in his footsteps, inshaAllah. Now, let me take you to Karbala. You've all heard that they killed Imam al-Hussein, and then, as if that was not enough for Lady Zainab and the women to watch, Shimr ibn Dhul Jawshan, Harmala, Sinan ibn Anas, if that whole thing was not enough, after the killing of Imam al-Hussein, their viciousness only intensified. In the aftermath of the murder of Abu Abdullah, they went into a state of mad hysteria. The first thing they did was they began to clap and they began to sing and they began to jump up and down. لَقَدْ قَتَلْنَا الْحُسَيْنَ بْنَ فَاطِمَةَ. We have killed Hussein, the son of Fatima. They did all that, and then they came and they severed the sacred heads of the martyrs, one after the other. Every single one of the companions of Imam al-Hussein, although بِأَبِي أَنْتَ وَأُمِّي يَا أَبَا عَبْدِ اللَّهِ. Some say that the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was severed even while he was still alive. When the other companions were dead, they came and severed their head. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. Everyone, turn your attention to Karbala. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. The caravan proceeded towards Kufa and then to Sham. The other day, I don't know if you saw this, but there was a clip that went viral online of a father beating his daughter. But the beating was so vicious. The minute I saw the video, I burst into tears because I thought to myself, this father is drunk. He's out of his mind. But at the end of the day, he's still her father. Imagine what they did to Imam Hussein's 3-year-old orphan, beating her from Karbala to Kufa and from Kufa to Sham, to the point where she had no strength left after that, and died in Sham and got buried next to the palace of Yazeed. Every time she said, Abatah, Abatah, my father, where are you? Some have said that she didn't know what had happened to Aba Abdullah. She's only 3 years old. How could she understand? Every time she asked her aunt Zainab, my aunt, where is my father? She would say, Inna abaki fi safar. Your father has gone on a trip. He's traveling, meaning the trip of the akhirah. So she had no idea what had happened. She didn't know why she's being beaten every time she asked for her father, until they were standing at the gate of Sa'at, the main gate of the city of Sham, when they had them wait for 3 days while the city was being decorated for the festivity that was to come. That's the time when they brought the severed heads of Abu Abdullah and the family of Imam al-Hussein and the companions of Imam al-Hussein. They say that Lady Zainab alayha salam, when she saw Abu Abdullah's head, she pointed to it saying, Ya Hilalan, لما استتم كمالا. Lady Zainab saw the head of Imam al-Hussein, but the women and children were too distracted. They say that when they entered the court of Yazeed ibn Muawiyah, Yazeed noticed that the women were hiding in a corner. They were crying alone. So Yazeed, being who he was, he called out the name of Rubab. He said, Ya Rubab, Ra'su man hadha? Do you know who's whose head this is. He pointed Rubab to the severed head of her 6-month-old infant Abdullah. أيوا حسينا ومظلوما وشهيدا. Rubab for the first time realized what they had done. One of them told the story. He said that when everyone was about to leave with one of the severed heads, one tribe turned around and said, we don't have a head. So I came and I said that I saw Aba Abdullah bury someone behind the tent. So we went, we dug up the grave, we took out the body of the infant child, we severed the head, placed it on a tall spear, and headed towards Kufa. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. يا حسين